How do you think, if at all, this now no longer minor upper body injury is being categorized as minor? How do you think this might affect the trade deadline?
Well, I said this in my post-practice update video on YouTube if you haven't checked it out, but I always thought that it was kind of a long shot that he was going to get moved at the deadline.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a long shot that he gets moved at some point, because you can sort of see how this depth chart is filling out. If Jamie Drysdale is part of this, which it appears he is, they just traded Cutter Gauthier for him. Presumably, he's a big piece. Yeah. And they seem to think that Travis Sanheim is a right-side defenseman. So suddenly, even if someone like Sean Walker does get moved, isn't re-signed, Ristolainen is suddenly a $5.1 million a year third-pair defenseman. That might not be the kind of cap allocation that you want to have for the next, few years. So I don't think that the talk about him getting traded at some point is bullshit. I think there's real smoke there, and I've heard that from people I've talked to. However, because of how much money is left on his deal, because of his cap hit, it's a harder deal to pull off at the trade deadline. To me, if he's going to get moved this year, it's probably going to be in the summer. That was always my feeling. Now it's almost certainly going to be the summer, because now there's absolutely no reason for a team to have urgency to trade for him now versus in June, because now you don't even know if you're going to have him for the rest of this season. Like, I'm not saying that he's definitely going to be out for the rest of the year, but with this kind of uncertainty, it's clear that hasn't been ruled out, that this might be season ending. It could be the way that the way we'll see this plays out over the next few weeks. If that's the case, why would a team rush to trade for a guy who's already going to be difficult to fit under their cap? Everybody's slammed up against the cap. We still have a stagnant cap situation, at least through the end of this season. Not a lot of teams have a ton of space, particularly teams that are contending. What I think this mostly does, and Anthony DeMarco tweeted this out with his initial report, it mostly shuts the door on the possibility of Ristolainen getting moved before the deadline. I do not think it shuts the door on Ristolainen getting moved, period. And I also don't think it was ever likely that he was going to get moved at the deadline. But what was once let's say 10 to 20% chance is now very much in single digits in my mind.
I'm just looking up because this was asked in the Discord earlier. I didn't write down who asked it, but thank you for the question. Is there some sort of cap manipulation that the Flyers can pull now? Because, okay, let's say we're not going to have Rasmus Ristolainen, but now I'm thinking, because I just looked it up, and I'm pretty sure you can trade for a player on LTIR.
You can.
If I am a playoff-bound team, we all know the Vegas, the Tampa Bay way of manipulating the cap. Well, there ain't no cap in the playoffs. You trade for a guy on LTIR, and you just don't activate him until the playoffs, and suddenly you have playoff Risto basically for free. Do you think anything like that, or just maybe the Flyers putting him on LTIR so they have more cap space?
I don't think the Flyers are going to put him on LTIR either, because I don't think they have to. It's not like anybody they would call up would cost a ton of cap, and with the fact that they have gotten the cap relief from the Carter Hart situation, Carter Hart is not going to count against the Flyers cap the rest of the year as long as he doesn't try to come back. Because of that, the Flyers are not lacking for cap space. Like they would, I think, if they needed to, they would put Ryan Ellis on LTIR long before they put Ristolainen on LTIR, because the only reason why they don't have Ellis on long-term IR is because it's preferable not to use it if you don't have to. Mm-hmm. But if they ever had to, if a trade came across their desk that they needed to open up space to fit that guy because somehow they had the chance to get a high-priced guy who fits their timeline, I think they would put Ellis on LTIR long before they put Risto on, because Risto actually has a chance of coming back, whereas Ellis is never going to play another hockey game again.
I'm just thinking about where the Flyers are. I'm just not even about a return in terms of a high-priced player, but in terms of retaining other salary or being the middleman, I maximizing think, a return in some way.
I think the Hart relief gives them the flexibility to do that enough that they don't need to play LTIR gymnastics to pull that off. The idea of a team trading for him, sticking him on LTIR, and then having him for the playoffs, that's an interesting idea. The only reason why I think that's unlikely is that with the uncertainty around a situation, there's no guarantee he'll be ready for the playoffs. He could be back in a couple weeks, or he could be out until the middle of the summer. So I think it's less that he's hurt now that would scare teams, and more that there's uncertainty surrounding his status, and you don't want to give up assets necessarily, especially for a guy who's going to involve a lot of cap gymnastics. You don't want to give up assets for a guy at this point, not knowing if he's going to be able to help you for the stretch run and the playoffs.
I was going to say, like, I think that's maybe a little less a concern for a guy with term, because it's like, well, we'll still have him, next year.
But it's just there's not the urgency.
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Why do it now? Trade
wait.
for somebody else. Trade for a rental, and if you really fucking still want him in the summer, trade for him in the summer.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to come up with different sorts of things that can happen that are fun.
Yeah.
I want it to be a fun trade deadline because, man,
you're not already entertained enough by the team winning games?
We all silly like the mayor.